Hello folks and welcome to the Vertigo Tea Party, my special video covering the text adventures. Now if you're not familiar, these text adventures are actually, you pick a choice. It's not quite choose your own adventure because you have to choose the correct choice to move on. It's not a big deal because you can just choose again. I am only going to be choosing the correct answers because I didn't really see a point in showing the wrong ones. There's some funny side text that it showed sometimes when you do that, but for the most part, I'm just going to go through the correct text each time. Let's go ahead and start with my youth. Our story begins in the remote village of Zenshire, a hamlet just west of Zenport in the country of Zenland, on a planet known only as Zen. By nature, the Zen people are an uncultured and slow-witted lot, easily entertained by such diversions as arm wrestling and counting the spots on one's back. The people of Zenshire most especially fit this description, so I'm sure you can already foresee the struggles I endured in life. The first of these struggles were my parents. My father, a simple butcher, was a small man with a fierce temper. Of all the things I learned from my father, the one that sticks with me the most has to be a lust for power. My father, though as thick as the back hair on a newly born zinfant, did indeed have an unquenchable hunger for control. While he never managed to rise higher than the head of a simple village council, he nonetheless carried the dream. My mother, on the other hand, a gifted seamstress who married far below her station, wanted me to enjoy the things so many others could not. I remember clearly on the eve of my 13th birthday, her taking me to Zinker's pastry shop. One might think a place such as Zenshire would not support a fine bakery, and you would be right. It closed a year after, but it was not for a lack of trying on my mother's part. She wished for her only child to have an appreciation for the finer offerings of life, and she began my education with Zinkar's delectable pastries. Not only did I sample the goods at Zinkar's shop, but I spent a summer there sweeping the floor, tending the counter, and even learning a bit of the culinary arts. I took to baking with zeal. Clients enjoyed my baked goods, and I became known throughout Zenshire for my cream puffs. I can still feel the layers of crisp dough flaking gently on my tongue, awash in a smooth release of sumptuous cream. Even though Zinkar's endeavor was not long for this world, I continued to sell my renowned cream puffs door to door, a business which thrived, I must say, doing well enough to supplement my admission to the most prestigious private school in Zinland. But that, my friends, is another story. Chapter 2: The Written Word. I had acquired the money to attend the finest school in Zinland, but that was just the beginning. While I would love to say Zinov Preparatory Academy embraced me with open arms, the truth of the matter is I was not the finest student. In order to gain admission, I had to endure rigorous physical and academic testing before they would grant me access to the legendary Halls of Learning. As is usual for admission to a school of such acclaim, the first of these tests was a scholastic aptitude exam. As was my mother's wish, Zinov Prep was an institution that prided itself on its scholastic offerings. To that end, it only accepted candidates that displayed academic prowess and further promise. So it was that I endured many weeks of standardized testing and training prior to my entrance examination. I am proud to say that I took to the studies well and managed to bring up my scores across the board. Still, there was one subject above all others that I had a particular affinity for. As you may have already guessed, the subject was literature. The written word. I had, like most Zen, learned to read while in utero, but that was all very dry text such as manuals and design documents. It wasn't until this far more serious pursuit into academia that I came to love the classics. How surprised was I that some of the finest literature in the universe came from a tiny, watery planet more than 10 million light-years away. While it would be some time until I visited that seemingly unremarkable way station, I had fallen in love with its artistic offerings already. One author's work in particular captured my imagination. Can you guess the scribe responsible? Jane Austen. Jane. Sweet, sweet Jane. How like my mother's dream you are. Even now, all these years later, just the thought of Emma, Eleanor, and Elizabeth's exploits and romantic missteps bring a lump to my throat. Oh, the intoxicating back and forth between Miss Bennet and Mr. Darcy, how I could read those lines towards infinity. It was my celebrated essay on Jane Austen's body of work that caught the attention of the Zinov Admissions Board, who not only allowed me entry into their fine institution, but secured my later position as head of the English Language Appreciators Society. Thus was my love of literature cemented and access to Zinov Preparatory Academy assured, which is where I met the teacher who would help me find my life's true purpose. Though that is another tale. Chapter 3: Zinov Prep. I clearly recall my first tentative steps into Zinov Preparatory Academy. I was a lad from the countryside coming into the big city, eyes wide and mind eager. I had never seen a building so large or so many finely dressed young people yearning for knowledge. It was the first time in my life I ever felt I was somewhere I truly belonged. Of course, not all of the Zenlings there were courteous, studious-minded folk. Predictably, it wasn't long before I crossed the path of a brutish young man named Zinfax. We instantly loathed each other. It was obvious from the start that Zinfax took umbrage with my lower-class upbringing. Typical, no? I was now entering the proud and prejudice-filled society I'd read about so eagerly just a few months prior. While Zinfax was a bore and a constant thorn in my side, I found solace in my studies. Literature had engaged me early on, but the offerings of Zinov Prep allowed me to expand into even higher-minded subjects, such as intergalactic warfare and how to exploit diplomacy for personal gain. What a world of knowledge there was to explore. More than any other Zinov facility, Professor Zinlo informed my later days. I remember clearly it was just 2 weeks into my first year when Zinlo pulled me aside after class and said to me, "Zinlak, never let anything or anyone stop you from pursuing your dreams." Has anyone ever told you that before? What a remarkable thing to say to a formative lad. And he was right. I, as the poor son of an ignorant butcher, had made it to the finest university on the planet. I wasn't just pursuing my dreams, I was living one. Those words kept me strong through 4 years of demanding study, kept my mind clear from physical distraction, and are to thank for my graduating with honors from Zinov Preparatory, a first for anyone from the hamlet of Zenshire. Preparatory, close enough. Upon receiving my diploma, I knew exactly what I must do. Kill Zinfax and then enter military service. Order of operation, don't you know? Yes, I admit I let my personal dislike for that heinous bully overcome me, and I snapped Zinfax's neck like an old bark flaking off a dying oak. My time at Zinov Preparatory now at an end, I entered yet another phase of my life, one that would take me to a great many exotic locations and allow me to realize my true potential. Thus ends my years as a plucky child. Next we meet, I shall regale you with the tale of Zinyak, the young man. Chapter 4: Military, the Early Years. After my time at Zinov Preparatory Academy, I did what all young people on Zen must do. I entered the military. Prior to my days at Zinov, I admit I did not look forward to this rite of passage, but after, I relished the idea of honing myself into the specimen I would later become. Basic training was, as it is designed to be, a particular sort of hell. I don't know what the rules are where you come from, reader, but military training for the Zen Army consists of a grueling 8-week course that pushes recruits to their breaking point. Some did not survive the training and were sent off to work in the mines or forced to join the Zen National Orchestra, famous across 7 galaxies for how hideous their music is. In order to endure the training, I often relied upon a manufactured hatred of my enemy. A wise man once said, "Without a target, we're all just bullets in the wind." I wrote that in my journal last week, and it's true. Whenever you find yourself facing a seemingly insurmountable challenge, it helps to envision all the turncoats, opportunists, and megalomaniacs that are just waiting for you to fail so that you can swoop down and pick the meat from your bones. With a furnace of pure hatred burning inside me, nothing would stop me from overtaking any challenge set before me. It was evident in the later days of my training that I was going to excel at conquering worlds. It was evident even then that I had conqueror's blood coursing through my veins. I took to every task with gusto, never accepting anything but the best from myself and all those around me. I had vision, I had drive, I had everything needed to seize the universe by the nebulas and make it mine. After basic, I entered service and was sent to the front line of the great war that was brewing on planet Bedard. There, I led the charge against the great Bedardian commander Franscott. Using my innately keen insight, I surprised Franscott by sneaking into his base under the cover of darkness. While it may sound like a simple tactic, you should be aware that the average day on planet Bedard lasts an excruciatingly long time. but I and my charge held our positions until the perfect moment to strike. We infiltrated Franscott's compound, trampled his men under our mighty boots, and shattered the door to his bedchamber, wherein I pounced upon the fool and smothered him with his own pillow. Even now, looking back, I can't help but smile. From there, I led the charge after numerous enemies of the Zen Empire. Soon, the entire Bedardian army fell before us, and we had yet another notch on our already impressively carved belts. Chapter 5: Rise to Power. A magnificent victory under my belt, my military superior saw fit to bestow upon me a meritorious service and the glory of the almighty Zen commendation, and my first of many promotions. Recognition breeds contempt, though, and I made many enemies throughout my military career, but perhaps none more scathing, more heartbreaking than Zinfob. The Brutus to my Caesar, Zinfob served with me well against the Bedardian army, but his pride got the best of him when he questioned my readiness to command. Citing my unquenchable bloodlust, cold and calculating demeanor, lack of consciousness, all the things that were held in such high regard during training, Zinfob dared to suggest that I was unfit for high-level command. I was brought before my superiors in a mock tribunal, held simply to satiate Zinfob's whim. I assure you, where I was called upon to defend myself against these allegations. Complying with the tenets of the charade, I took my seat as defendant. As clear as the strained cries of a fallen foe, the charges were leveled against me. Against each one, I explained myself in a clear, concise manner. Admittedly, I may have used some coarse language as emphasis to underline my points, but I conducted myself as one ought during any legal proceeding. After carefully explaining myself to the council, they saw my point of view and dismissed Zinfob's case against me. Afterwards, I hunted my accuser down and killed him where he stood. That nastiness behind me, I not only continued to fulfill my role with the Zen army, but I excelled at it. After many more successful terrestrial campaigns against our foes, the officials saw fit to give me my own ship. Indeed, no longer was I a simple passenger on our interplanetary death vessels. I now had my hand firm upon the rudder. Metaphorically speaking, of course, interplanetary death vessels are steered by complicated navigation systems. Now, a celebrated member of the Zen army, with a seasoned crew at my command, I headed out toward adventure. It was time to leave terra firma behind me and venture towards the stars. After forcibly convincing my crew to celebrate my newly appointed position with a soiree in our honor, we lifted anchor and spread our sails, again metaphorically speaking, towards destinations just ripe for the picking. And that, dear reader, is where my tale gets most exciting. Chapter 6: Ad Astra per Aspera. Like a siren calling ships to the rocks, the velvety expanse of space has been a harsh mistress to many. To me, the unconquered reaches were a challenge I not only accepted, but yearned for. So many poor souls blithely unaware of how mediocre their existence were, without a firm hand to guide them towards greatness. Oh, how I longed to be that hand. I am not a soul easily satisfied, so I knew my dream destination must be a planet that would challenge not the collective might of the Zen army, but my tactical instinct. The terrestrial victories I had accumulated in my prior campaigns often failed to adequately test my keen tactical instinct. The maneuvers and strategies employed by so many of my foes were woefully pedestrian on their best days. I knew somewhere in the celestial womb a leader must exist who could properly challenge me. How fortunate I was that I only had to eradicate 12 civilizations before coming toe-to-toe with the talented and well-trained forces of the Jet Yang theocracy. Despite what you may have heard about the people of the Jet Yang quadrant, I assure you that they were ahead of the rest in their martial prowess. Perhaps most impressively, the Jet Yang had mastered planetary shield technology. By harnessing the geothermal energy of Jet Yang's molten core, the theocracy was able to power a Dyson sphere-like shield around the entire planet. It sparkled in the sun like a chorus line of stars, purating in the sheerest glimmer of lights. The way it shattered in the wake of our neutronic lasers was simply breathtaking. Upon our arrival on their planet's surface, the head of the theocracy, an imposing figure named Bishop Quirkzug, pleaded for not only his own life, but the lives of his people. Always a fair man, I agreed to meet him on a level field of battle, mano a mano as true gentlemen. I even let him select the contest. Much to my surprise, he chose arm wrestling. And I thought I had left such uncultured diversions back on Zen. I learned then that this so-called sport had reached a far wider audience than I had hoped. Yes, Quirkzug chose to challenge me at arm wrestling. How for a society so advanced in technology, thought I, could they be so taken with grasping hands and pushing? Little did I know that the cephalopodian anatomy of the jet yang, combined with the curved surfaces that passed as tables, allowed them the great leverage at the sport. Oh, how clever Quirkzug was, luring me into a trap that played upon my own prejudices. Well done indeed. As it turns out, the winner of the match was Quirkzug. Yes, Quirkzug used his anatomical advantage to best me at that infantile test of strength. After shooting him through his enormous eye, I congratulated his corpse on a job well done. Giving the Jet Yang people no quarter, we made hasty work of their pathetic planet, and to this day I keep Quirkzug's desiccated tongue in my pocket. I rub it for luck. Though I wasn't aware of it prior, the Jet Yang homeworld was a rich source of gemstones and minerals in rare reserve on other planets. With resources in high demand at our disposal, I was able to fund many more conquests throughout the richness of space. A fascinating story that I will tell you soon. Chapter 7: The Great Zen Expansion. As you indubitably are already aware, the Grand Jet Yanger victory was just the beginning of my storied career in the Zen army. I still had numerous conquests awaiting me, including my first venture out toward a place the native scholars once called Via Lactea. Possessing astute foresight as I do, coupled with my at times all-consuming need for control, I knew that before I set out to do anything more, I must find a second in command. Even I cannot be everywhere at once. I knew in order to keep my crew appropriately subordinate, while still being able to have some essential me time, that I had to have someone I could trust implicitly to oversee the orders I gave. Someone who could be my eyes and ears and also tend to my every whim without question. It was a plucky young soldier named Zinjai who stood cranial-crowned and shoulders above the rest. I knew he would make a fine lieutenant, but as is customary to prove one's successor's worth, I first administered a quiz to determine his understanding of basic etiquette. I was not about to appoint someone as my military surrogate and manservant who was unable to appreciate propriety and tradition. I knew that if anyone were to even attempt to fill my proverbial boots, that they had to be able to do so in any conceivable situation. So it was I constructed a battery of examinations designed to test his etiquette across all manner of occasion. They really were brilliant, if I do say so myself. I am proud to state that Zinjai passed every test in spectacular fashion, though we did almost have an incident when we were attacked prior to the dinner course of a fine meal. In what was a regrettable lapse in judgment on the part of famed Boonian tactician Ariel the Furious, the Boon Armada attacked us in mid-space during the most important segment of Zinjai's testing. After destroying the Boon fleet shift and flaying all the crew members, I beheaded Ariel the Furious with a bread knife and threw his remains into the onboard incinerator. Zinjai and I then went on to enjoy a most lovely meal full of fresh Boon steaks and delightful conversation. His testing over, I formally named Zinjai as my lieutenant/servant, and we continued our trek into deep space. Per my grand plan, I set about culling the universe of its weakest culture first, starting with the Khajantar tribes of Central Aspasia. The Khajantar tribes have been a blight on Central Aspasia since time immemorial. Really, I was doing everyone a favor by raising these heathens to the ground. But did the unified nation of Central Aspasia show me any gratitude at all? No, of course not. Monster, they cried. Psychopath. Nothing short of planet-wide genocide was going to shut them up, which thankfully it did. From there, I continued on my path, conquering every planet that stood in my path. Yet, despite the sense of unparalleled accomplishment, I felt something was lacking. It was not until later that I would stumble upon my greatest achievement, my defining moment. Chapter 8: My Defining Moment. Yes, I held the keys to the universe in my grasp, yet something was missing. These victories, numerous though they were, felt hollow. I found myself wanting more, needing more. What could I possibly be missing? I had everything. Civilizations trembled when I announced my presence. My own army lived in fear of my wrath. What could I possibly be lacking? Then, like an evolutionary link crawling from the depths of a primordial soup, it hit me. I had taken so many lives. For what purpose? Conquering was not enough. I needed to test them, to challenge them, to collect them. It was then that I decided to build the simulation. I could not trust those who fell before my might to roam around unsupervised in the real world, but a virtual one. That was another matter entirely. It came to me as a vision. A vast, interconnected web of simulated worlds designed not only to contain the best and brightest in the universe, but to break their wills and make them subservient to me, Zinyak, Galactic Overlord and Head Emperor Supreme of the Zen Empire. Oh, did I forget to mention I killed my predecessor and claimed his throne for my own? Apologies for the oversight. I tasked Zenjai with overseeing the simulation's construction. We would hold the physical bodies of my fallen foes in a nutrient-rich suspension designed to accommodate even the most peculiar metabolisms. Meanwhile, their minds would go on in a world of my own creation, based on each subject's deepest fear. Yes, everybody, aside from your humble narrator, is afraid of something. Familial loss, a straying loved one, anonymity, spiders, and by subjecting each victim to their deepest fear, to replay their most dreaded moment over and over and over again until their psyche shatters and their mind becomes malleable putty in my eager fingers, I could control them. I could control everyone. Once the simulation was completed, all I needed to do was find a test subject. And who better to test the simulation upon than my right-hand man? Zenjai was not eager to partake in the simulation, but after a brief, though intensely painful discussion, he saw the benefits of the architect being the first to walk into his own building. For hours, I heard Zenjai's screams echo throughout the ship, like the mellifluous song of a child in mourning, and I knew then that the simulation was my raison d'etre. I messed that up, sorry. It would set the standard for forward-thinking empires throughout the universe, and if any should ever match its brilliance, I will crush them and claim their design for my own. After extracting Zenjai from his personal nightmare, he gave me his most wholehearted approval. When asked what his version of hell was, he said, "A life with only me." To be honest, Zenjai didn't tell me what his deepest fear was, and I didn't press the matter, for I had other things to do. With the simulation as my crown jewel, I took to universal conquering with renewed zeal. I found a pleasure in forced subjugation of sentient life forms I never thought I'd have again. My enemies didn't simply fall by my sword. Their wills were snapped like the bones of a mouthy subordinate. I no longer had only the echo of their dying words to remember them by. I had a whole world of twisted imagery and deep-rooted doubts and phobias. Oh joy, oh cascading bliss. And I could visit them whenever I wanted. I had complete control. I held their brittle consciousness in my hand and could play with them like flickering seeds into the wind. The simulation was not perfect. Nothing is. Even the masterwork Venus de Milo is short a couple of appendages. But it was mine, and it was beautiful. For those who tested my patience by attempting escape, I had protocols in place. When needed, I intervened personally, though it was rarely necessary. Many of the subjects thought they were exceptions to the simulation's rule, but I put every one of them summarily back in their place. So it was I went about collecting the exemplary specimens from cultures throughout the entirety of the known world, with one exception. A certain destination whose exploitation I wished to savor. A place whose artistic contributions had first set me upon my path. There was someone there I especially wished to meet, and with the time-bending capability of the mothership, I could. But also I knew any planet capable of literary work of that caliber must also breed warriors unlike any others. I was excited, reader. Every part of my essence shivered with anticipation. With the might of the Zen Empire behind me, I set out toward the far corner of the universe, towards a new galaxy, to conquer a planet I had only enjoyed through its culture. Earth. Le Fin. Alright, thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed. If you'd like to check out my Let's Play of Saints Row, I have a link to it in the video description, or you can go buy it on Steam, which you totally should. Great game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.